In October 2021, the world of finance witnessed a moment of pure, unadulterated euphoria. The rental car giant, Hertz, had just emerged from the wreckage of a Chapter 11 bankruptcy. They were looking for a rebirth story. They found it in a single press release. Hertz announced they were placing an initial order for 100,000 Tesla Model 3s, a deal worth $4.2 billion. On that news alone, Tesla's market cap surged past $1 trillion. Hertz shares skyrocketed. They hired Tom Brady to tell the world that the future had arrived. It was the perfect corporate narrative, the heritage brand meeting the tech disruptor. But as we sit here in 2026, looking at the forensic ledger of that decision, the narrative has curdled into a nightmare. Hertz didn't just fail, they suffered a total strategic liquidation. In early 2025, the company finalized a staggering $2.9 billion net loss for the fiscal year 2024. This wasn't just a bad quarter. This was the result of a fire sale, where Hertz was forced to dump 30,000 electric vehicles into a market that didn't want them at prices they couldn't survive. This is the clinical autopsy of the Hertz-Tesla disaster. It is a story of how a former Goldman Sachs executive CEO ignored the three fundamental laws of the rental business: depreciation, repairability, and consumer psychology. Hertz bought at the absolute peak of the market. They bought at retail prices. They bought without a buyback agreement. And then they watched as Elon Musk did the unthinkable. He started cutting prices. This is part one, the peak of the mountain before the fall. To understand why this was a disaster, you have to understand the rental arbitrage. A rental company is not a transportation company. It is a logistics and resale company. They buy cars in bulk, rent them for 18 months, and then sell them. The profit is the difference between the rental income and the residual value of the car. If the car loses its value too fast, the business model collapses. Hertz bought 100,000 Teslas when the Model 3 was at its most expensive. They paid full price. Then, in 2023 and 2024, Tesla began a series of aggressive price cuts to maintain their own volume. When the price of a new Tesla drops by $10,000 overnight, the value of every used Tesla in the Hertz fleet instantly evaporates. Hertz was holding a melting ice cube in a heat wave. Their depreciation expense jumped by nearly 90%. They were losing $537 per vehicle every single month just by letting the cars sit on the lot. They weren't just losing money on rentals, they were losing the very asset base that their company was built upon. This was the price war that Hertz never saw coming. They bet their entire balance sheet on the stability of a tech stock, forgetting they were in the used car business. The clinical failure of execution. If the depreciation was the heart attack, the repair costs were the internal bleeding. Hertz management made a fatal assumption. They believed that because electric vehicles have fewer moving parts, they would be cheaper to maintain. On paper, this makes sense. No oil changes, no spark plugs, no transmission fluid. But in the rental reality, this assumption was a $500 million mistake. Rental cars get into accidents. It is a statistical certainty. When a gasoline-powered Toyota Camry gets a dent in the bumper, any body shop in America can fix it for $800 in 48 hours. When a Tesla Model 3 gets a dent in the bumper, the story changes. Because of Tesla's closed ecosystem, parts are hard to find. The structural battery pack makes even minor collisions a potential total loss for insurance purposes. Hertz found themselves in a situation where their EVs were costing twice as much as to repair as their gasoline counterparts. And while the cars were waiting for parts, sometimes for months, they weren't earning a single cent in revenue. But the repair crisis was only half the problem. The other half was the user error. Hertz was renting high-performance, high-torque electric vehicles to people who had never driven an EV before. Imagine a traveler landing at LAX after a 10-hour flight. They are tired, they are frustrated. They walk up to a Tesla, there is no key, there is only a card, there are no buttons, everything is on a screen. The learning curve for a Tesla is steep.
Hertz employees who were not trained as tech support found themselves spending 30 minutes per customer just explaining how to put the car in drive. Even worse, these customers were taking these cars into the infrastructure desert of the American highway system. The range anxiety was real. Customers were returning cars on the back of tow trucks because they couldn't find a charger or because they didn't understand that cold weather kills battery life. Hertz's own data showed that customer satisfaction for EV rentals was significantly lower than for internal combustion engines. The future of mobility was a logistical nightmare. By the end of 2023, the CEO who started this gamble, Stephen Scher, was forced to admit that the EV experiment was a drag on the entire company. Hertz began the fire sale. They announced they would offload 20,000, then 30,000, then more. They were selling Teslas for as low as $20,000, cars they had bought for $50,000 just 2 years prior. This was the liquidation of hubris. Hertz was dumping their green future just to survive the financial present.
As we analyze the data in 2026, the Hertz-Tesla disaster has become a case study in every major business school. It marks the end of the corporate virtue signaling era. For years, companies believed that going green would automatically result in going black on the balance sheet. They thought that ESG scores would protect them from the harsh mathematics of the used car market. Hertz proved that the math always wins. The $2.9 billion loss of 2024 was a systemic failure of risk management. Hertz ignored the fact that Tesla is a high beta company. They're a software company that happens to make cars, and software companies don't care about the residual value of their older versions. When Apple releases a new iPhone, the old one is a legacy. When Elon Musk releases a cheaper, faster Tesla, the old one is a liability. Hertz tried to build a legacy business on top of a disposable tech cycle. But the 2026 warning goes deeper than just Hertz. It is a warning for the entire EV adoption curve. If the largest rental companies in the world, with all their data and all their scale, cannot make the EV math work, what does that say for the average consumer? It tells us that the total cost of ownership is still a mystery. It tells us that the repair infrastructure is not ready for the mass market. And most importantly, it tells us that brand popularity is not the same as business utility. Hertz has now pivoted to a back-to-basics strategy. They are buying Toyotas, they are buying Fords, they are buying the very gasoline dinosaurs they once claimed to be replacing. They are doing this because a dinosaur is predictable. A dinosaur has a known resale value. The Tesla fire sale was the moment the rental industry woke up from its electric dream. It was a $2.9 billion alarm clock. Hertz is now a leaner company. They have a new CEO, Gil West. They are focused on operational excellence instead of media headlines. But the scar tissue remains. The billion-dollar write-downs will take years to recover. The lesson for the Business Success Unlimited audience is this: never let a narrative override your spreadsheet. The crowd was cheering for the 100,000 Teslas. Tom Brady was smiling in the commercials. The stock market was rewarding the vision. But the cars were depreciating at $500 a month. The bumpers were costing $4,000 to fix, and the customers were stranded at chargers in the middle of the night. In the end, the future arrived, but it was too expensive for Hertz to own. My name is George, and this is the forensic end of the electric gambit. The fire is out, but the ashes are still cooling. Stay vigilant.